I want help. I do. I want help.
이 영화는 심전에 관한 것.
This is a film about psychological warfare,
왜곡된
a
정보를
specific
받아들여
type of warfare designed to distract,
무감각하게 만들도록
misinform,
But trust me,
특정 형태의
and anesthetize the brain.
형식. 심리전은 변장술에 능한
It has many disguises
많은 모습으로
and is used against every one of them,
아울러 노동자,
against them,
어린이, 일반 인민 한 사람
And against
한
them.
사람을 대상으로 하고 있다. 물론 이와 같은 검모
Of
술수적
course,
행위는
such
무장을
Machiavellian
동반하여
activity requires a disguise,
프로파간디스트들이
which is why propagandists call themselves the public relations industry.
PR이라 부른다 할 수 있다. 오늘날 미국
But do not be fooled.
사실을 전하는
Public
기자의
relations
수보다
and propaganda are interchangeable,
하지만 속지 말아야 할
and it is the
것이다.
massive public relations industry
상호 호환성이 있으며
that is designed to alter perception,
인간의 사고를
reshape
바꾸도록 하고
reality,
현실을 탈바꿈시켜
and manufacture
합의를
consent.
생산해내도록 설계된 것일 뿐이다.
A Hollywood set designer was brought in to create a $200,000 backdrop for official war briefings.
오늘날 미국 하나만 봐도
Today,
사실을
America
전하는
alone
기자의
has
수보다
more
더
public
많은
relations
프로파간디스트들이
propagandists
있으며
than reporters,
이 사실은 서구 사회
which
사람들이
means
듣고
that nearly half of what people in the West hear, see, or read
전문적인
is written by
거짓말장애에 의해서
professional
지어진다고
liars.
할 수 있다. 전문 거짓말장애의 이 일은
Professional liars whose job it is to keep people in front of their televisions,
잡지들을 읽도록 하며
reading gossip magazines,
양의 유해
eating vast amounts of toxic food, and shopping, always shopping for the latest fashions and trends.
만드는 것이다. 이것이 프로파간디스트들에게
That's the ideal for propagandists.
상황이라고 할 수 있다. 그리고 그
And great efforts are made in trying to achieve and maintain that ideal.
아끼지 않는다. 대중이 스스로
Anything that keeps the masses from organizing themselves and asking important questions about what their masters are really up to.
대중을 지켜내기 위한 모든 것을 포함한다. 1960년대는
The
학생들이
1960s,
이끄는 것에
a period of heightened awareness and rebellion against the establishment,
시기였다고 할 수 있다.
with students
하지만
leading the
사태가
resistance.
통제를 벗어나는 것 같이
But when the
보이면
situation seems to be getting out of hand, the establishment ordered it to be stopped, and the propagandists moved quickly to lead the young people away from dangerous protests into such fashionable protests. That was then. This is now.
사회 혁명을 제외한 패션,
Fashion,
연예인,
celebrity,
섹스,
sex,
음악,
music,
기술 등
technology,
모든
any
다른
kind of
종류의
revolution
혁명으로 바뀌어가고
except
있다.
the social revolution.
이 영화에서는
In this film, we will
사용자들을
reveal
대신하여
the methods
해당
used by the
인민들을
propagandists
조종하는
to control
프로파간디스트들이
populations
사용하는
on
방법들을
behalf of their
살피도록 하겠다.
owners.
부유하고 강력한 힘을 가진
Although
사용자들이
these rich and powerful owners only make up 1% of the world's population,
대상으로
they
자신들에게
have mastered the use of propaganda over 99% of the world's population, turning them into consumer slaves who work harder and harder to buy things they don't need. These consumer slaves are also made to pay taxes to their government, money which is used to develop new weapons for the pernicious invasions and occupations of other countries.
지난 5년만 보더라도
In the last 5 years alone, they've given their owners more than $1 trillion for these illegal and immoral wars that can't be won, and are even encouraged to send their own children to fight them.
독려하였다.
This is Doctor of Psychology, Professor Kim.
어떻게 인류를 무감각,
You have just been exposed to a range of propaganda devices used by the West to control,
다수의 프로파간다
manipulate,
방법들을
neutralize,
접하였다.
and anesthetize entire populations,
인민들을 포함한
its own
다른
and
나라의
that of other nations.
인민들까지 모두 다 말이다. 이와 같은 정신적 왜곡 방법의 성공 비결은 어떻게
The
대중
success of these mind-warping devices depends on their remaining hidden from the masses.
남아 있느냐 하는 것에 있다고 할 수 있다. 그러나 경애하는 지도자 동지는 인민 모두가 스스로의 눈으로 정확하게 어떻게
But our
정신
dear leader has
세계에
insisted
대한
that you see with your own eyes exactly how this war against the mind is used to turn Western citizens
노예 집단으로
into
변화시키는데
compliant slaves.
이용되는지를 볼 것을 주장해 오셨다. 지금 이 사람이 세계 신기록을
Has this man just broken a world record? Has he just created a medicine that can save thousands of lives? Perhaps he's been chosen to represent his community in some way. No, this man has just purchased a telephone.
구매에 성공하였다. 그렇다면
And these people, what is making them scream and cry with such profound joy? They are on a television program where they are receiving consumer items. This for some boots. This for some clothes shelves. And this hysteria is not because they have found God, but because they are receiving sneakers. The propagandist knows that an individual has a natural desire to be on a winning side and appear to fit in with the crowd. One of the easiest ways to achieve this is to make them chant favorable, yet deliberately vague slogans like, "This changes everything."
This is going to change everything.
Just do it. I'm loving it. Or support our troops.
Support our troops 같은
The point of slogans like support our troops is that they don't mean anything. That's the whole point of good propaganda. You want to create a slogan that nobody's going to be against and everybody's going to be for. Nobody knows what it means because it doesn't mean anything. Points out Professor Noam Chomsky.
이것을 염두에 두고 보면
With this in mind, propagandists can provide simple answers to complex problems and ask for approval without question.
Either you're with us, either you love freedom, or you're with the enemy.
이들은 이 방법을 이용하여
They can use this method to sell phones, violence, cosmetics, or even false wars, like the unwinnable war on terror announced by these degenerates, and the hypocritical war on drugs announced by this master criminal, who is awarding a medal to this man for joining the war on drugs, despite this man being a drug addict.
만들어낼 수 있는 것이다. 가장 인기 있는 슬로건들은
The most popular slogans contain virtue words that embody what slaves in the West have been conditioned to value most dearly. Words like
자유,
freedom,
진실,
truth,
평화,
peace,
해방과 같은
liberty,
단어들이며
and
가장
most
중요한
importantly,
단어는 민주주의.
democracy.
가장 인기 있는 슬로건들은
The 20th century has been characterized by three developments of great political importance: the growth of democracy, the growth of corporate power,
진실,
and the growth of corporate propaganda
해방과 같은
as a means of
단어들은요,
protecting
가장
corporate power
중요한 단어는
against
민주주의라고
democracy.
할 수 있다. 하워드 진이
Writes
써서
Howard
내용이다.
Zinn.
마지막 줄을 다시 한번
Let's
보도록
look
하죠.
at that last line again.
민주주의에 반하여
The growth of
기업의
corporate
영향력을
propaganda
보호하기 위한
as a means
수단으로서
of protecting
이용되는
corporate
기업
power
프로파간다의
against
성장.
democracy.
이것이 과연 사실일까?
Is this true?
실상을 한번
Let's look at the
살펴보자.
facts.
Killed. But your government has
1945년
Since 1945, America has tried to overthrow 50 governments, many of them democracies.
이 과정 중
In the process,
강력하고
over
우리나라
30 countries and their
소외적
people
국가인
have been
우리
attacked,
공화국을 포함한 30개국이 넘는 나라에서
including
해당
our
국가
own
인민들에
great and
대한
powerful
공격이 이루어졌다.
socialist sovereign nation.
그 결과는 어땠는가?
And the result?
민주주의 국가가 아닌
Not
단
one
하나라도
single
진정한
undemocratic country
민주주의로의
has been turned
전향이
into a
이루어지지
genuine
못했다.
democracy.
Open the door! Get your hands up and come outside.
Yeah, clear the house now. Let's sweep on down.
I want peace as much as you do.
다른
The
나라를
grotesque act of invading other countries, claiming them as your territory, and stealing their resources to keep your emperor, crown, or corporate owners in power used to be known as empire building.
제국 건설을 위한 가장
The
최근의
latest propaganda slogan for empire building is
globalization.
globalization,
결집이라는
a vague word with warm connotations of unification.
하지만 이의 진정한
But what it really
의미는
means is the acquisition of other people's resources at any cost
무제한적인
and unlimited slave labor. Slave labor needed to produce the unnecessary goods sold to these slaves.
생산하기 위해 필요한 노동
Slaves to persuasion and influence.
노출되어 있는 노예들. 현실적으로 이들은
In
자신들이
reality,
구매하는 것들에
these are
대해
debt
돈을
slaves,
지불할 수도 없기
since they
때문에
can't even afford the
일찍이
things they buy.
노예들이라고도 할 수 있다. 설령
Even in
경제가
times of
붕괴되거나
peril and economic
위기
meltdown,
상황이라도 그들 대통령의
at the orders of their
명령으로
president,
이들은 계속해서
they must keep consuming.
하여야 한다. 이것이
Is this
과연
democracy?
민주주의인가? 2003년 2월
On
15일
February 15, 2003, millions of people worldwide took to the streets in the world's largest ever day of protest,
조작된 구실을 위한
a protest
전쟁을
against the
선포한
pirate
해적
Bush
불시적
regime
공감,
and their
그의
British
주변
and Australian
영국과
lapdogs
호주를 상대로 한
who
시위.
wanted to go to war on
세계
manufactured
대다수는
grounds.
이 전쟁에 반대하는
The
것에
majority of the
한표를
world
던졌다.
voted against this
그렇지만
war,
그들의 의견은
but
묵살되었다.
were ignored.
이것이
Is
과연
this democracy?
민주주의란 말인가? 강력한 힘을 가진 1%
The powerful
집단은
1% went ahead with their pre-planned war, as always, using the poorest people's children to do the fighting.
We're here for your fucking freedom! So back up right now!
주지하여야 될 부분은
It's important to note that these cowards were happy to order mass death and destruction,
없음에도 불구하고 파괴와
despite never having been in
집단
battle
살상을
themselves.
명령하는 것에 주저함이 없다는 것이다.
Is
민주주의란
this
말인가?
democracy?
아니다.
No.
민주주의란 대중이 결정을 도출할 때
Real democracy is when the majority of people make a decision and it's
전
upheld.
세계를 거쳐
For
이루어진
example,
투표에서
in polls taken throughout the world,
거짓으로 짜맞춰진
the vast majority of citizens want to see these war criminals committed to stand trial for crimes against humanity,
시민이란 점을 들어 인간성에 대한 범죄로서
since 90% of the
해당
casualties
전범자들
of their false war
재판장에
on
세우는
terror
것에
were innocent
지지표를
civilians.
던졌다. 실질적인 테러와의 전쟁은 다프
War on
Myanmar,
terror is a vague propaganda slogan, as a real war on terror would include direct intervention in Darfur, Myanmar, and Zimbabwe, where Robert Mugabe has made a mockery of the Americans' claim to love democracy. A real war on terror would start with American citizens refusing to pay taxes that support Israel's illegal occupation of Palestine. Taxes that could be used to help Americans who are unemployed, working without health care, and homeless. Of course, if you dared to point this out in America, you would be named anti-American and a traitor, or one of those who hate freedom. So people keep quiet because they are afraid of expressing how they feel.
If we are not vigilant,
You've got to keep them pretty scared, because unless they're properly scared and frightened that all sorts of devils are going to destroy them from outside or inside or somewhere, they may start to think, which is very dangerous, because they're not competent to think. Therefore, it's important to distract them and marginalize them. Points out Professor Noam Chomsky. Before you can distract and marginalize them, however, you first have to know what motivates them.
communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition akin to disease that spreads like an epidemic. And like an epidemic, a quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
Fear is the engine room of imperial propaganda.
We cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Those who have understood this have manipulated people for centuries, indeed millennia, by manufacturing and controlling religion. The Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Catholicism use a propaganda manual called the Bible. Although it is the same story, each brand claims its version is the best one. As with any advertising, the propagandist knows that there is no idea easier to sell than the idea that you are vastly superior to everyone else. So they tell their followers that they are unique in human history, that they are descended from the first man and first woman, and that they are chosen by their supreme creator to rule over all other cultures. To secure the deal, they add the idea of an eternal soul. That way, death doesn't seem so bad, and they won't resist being sent to fight against competing brands. Religion is regarded by the common people as true, by the wise as false, and by the rulers as useful. Seneca the Younger. Of course, only the truly ignorant believe that books like the Bible are really the Word of God.
종교는
Religion is
지독하게도
horribly,
틀림없이
unmistakably
인간적인 것이다.
human.
구약 성경에 등장하는 신은
The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction,
시기심 많고
jealous and proud of it,
옹졸하고
a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak,
자기 뜻대로 하려는 인물이다. 또한
a
복수심으로 가득
vindictive,
차 있고
bloodthirsty ethnic
군주의
cleanser,
민족 말살자이며 여자와
a
동성애자를
misogynistic, homophobic, racist,
유아 살해범이며
infanticidal,
학살자이고
genocidal,
자기 자식을 살해한
filicidal,
범죄자이며 역병을
pestilential,
창조시킨 과대망상
megalomaniacal,
가학
sadomasochistic,
피해성 변태이며 변덕이
capriciously
심하고
malevolent
고약한
bully.
폭군이다. 과학자
scientist Richard Dawkins.
과학적으로 분석하면
With the use of science, we can now diagnose God as a psychopath with extreme narcissistic personality disorder.
다른 사람들을
He is a
조종하기
character created by humans who sought to control others by naming themselves as prophets of
위하여 인물에
God.
불과하다. 신의 예언자라고
While most people who claim to be prophets of God are kept in mental asylums, others make their way into positions of power.
Are a group of predatory control freaks.
본인은
Hence today, I believe I am acting in accordance with the will of the mighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of the Lord. Adolf Hitler. Working in accordance with God isn't just for believers. British Prime Minister Tony Blair turned to Catholicism after killing as many innocent Muslim civilians as possible. Now he can be forgiven for mass murder and sit next to his God for eternity. All he has to do is sit in a box and confess his sins to a priest. For terrorists like Tony Blair, the Mafia, and the IRA, Catholicism is the ideal choice. The Catholic Church wholeheartedly supported the Nazis, and with the help of the CIA, continued to protect them after the fall of the Third Reich by passing them along the infamous rat line to safety in America. It also goes out of its way to protect the malignant child abusers who run its operations worldwide. Most of all, it protects the Pope, the richest man in the world, who travels to Africa pleading for an end to poverty, despite never using his own riches to help his most desperate followers. Instead, he promises the poorest that they will be the richest in heaven.
This crusade, this war on terrorism, is going to take a while.
This toxic Texan claims that God told him to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. So he did, killing hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. He must speak to the same God as his father, whose war and sanctions killed millions of innocent civilians in the same place.
I have said to the people of Iraq that our quarrel was not with them, but instead with their leadership, and above all with Saddam Hussein. You, the people of Iraq, are not our enemy. We do not seek your destruction.
This man clearly enjoys killing people. Even though he was too scared to fight for his country during the American War of Aggression in Vietnam, he broke all records for killing prisoners during his time as governor of Texas. Such a civilized society, America, where this two-term president refused to pardon Ricky Ray Rector from execution. A man so severely retarded that when the guards interrupted his last meal to lead him to his execution, he assured them it was okay because he would just have to finish it when they got back. Like God, these leaders show no mercy to the weak. Even in their own country, after a devastating hurricane, no mercy for the weak. And here, no mercy for the weak.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Although the psychopath makes up less than 5% of the Western population, those infected with narcissism and unusual intelligence force their way into the 1% who rule over the masses. Drawn to politics and big business, they are strongly against democracy. Because in a true democracy, these treacherous monsters would be impeached and sentenced to death for lying, fraud, treason, race hate, mass murder, and war crimes. But impeachment is not acceptable, declared this smiling new president, who came to power in 2009. Why? Because he is one of them. His advisors are drawn from the same gang of Washington thugs and Wall Street banksters as the so-called opposition. His presidency was paid for by the same lobbyists and corporations that sponsored all of the other presidents before him. Here we see the most obvious lie in democracy, the one that two candidates represent a choice when they are clearly run by the same interests. There's actually a single-party system in the United States, a Demo-Republican Party, under the guise of two parties, Democrat and Republican. No matter which of the two you vote for the Demo-Republican Party. This was said by a conservative ideologue, R. Ridger.
This time, vote like your whole world depended on it.
Allowing people to vote for one of your brands is the best way to make them feel like they are connected to their candidate and involved in a democracy. When they become wary or distrustful of one candidate, you give them a completely new smiling face and simple slogans like, "Yes, we can," and "Time for change," that are easy to chant and provide hope, but are essentially meaningless. Meaningless because this charming president will do exactly what he is told to do by his corporate masters, spending countless billions on killing humans in faraway lands while his own people continue to suffer. Democracy is just a slogan.
Survivor is coming with a super big cast.
In this vulgar television series, carefully selected Americans have to pretend to survive by being the most conniving, manipulative, and money-hungry contestant on embarrassingly contrived multi-million-dollar sets to win money.
For $1 million, I can do just about anything.
This is a perfect metaphor for America, where the real survivors are the millions of homeless people who don't get to go home after filming. Look at these images from celebrated filmmaker Quentin Tarantino. What happened to this man as a child? What did America do to him that he should make such images for people to watch? Is he a psychopath?
아니다.
No.
이 동무는 단지
He is simply reinterpreting the Western cult of death he grew up with
소구적 의식을 인간의 팔다리가
for new generations of consumer zombies who crave seeing their fellow humans mutilated in new and inventive ways.
재해석했을 뿐이다. 이런 죽음의 의식을
This cult of death is rooted in the Bible, which the imperialist slaves believe is actually the word of God, the same God that's used to send them to kill humans on the other side of the world because they have a different God. God and country are an unbeatable team. They break all records for oppression and bloodshed. Louis Buñuel.
오늘날
Here
통치자들에
we see the
의하여
simplistic duality of good versus evil, peddled by today's rulers.
우리 편이다.
God is on our side, and everyone is choosing our brand.
선택해라.
Make your choice. You're either with us or against us.
나는 그런 논리말이다. 이것은 1%
This reassures the 99% that the 1% is strong and has everything under control.
재확인시켜주는 것이다.
Now they can relax and get back to their football game, video games, TV shows, or go shopping.
1% 집단은 종교로서
The
99%
1% have always controlled the 99% with religion. They are the ones who control information and decide what people think.
결정하는 사람들이다. 그들은 심지어 인민들이 어떤
They
일이
even decide what people know about the
알
past.
권리마저 자신들이 결정해버린다.
Who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. George Orwell.
Now some people running along the dikes. Roger. Good job. I saw you splatter one right in the back with a rocket. Roger, got lucky again.
When carrying out attacks on other nations, destroying their infrastructure, and deforming their future generations with the use of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, the imperialist needs to rewrite history and keep repeating it over and over until it becomes true.
Young lady with the red hair right behind the school teacher there.
Mr. President, why did you drop the atom bomb?
Mr. President, the future wants to know, was it right to drop the atom bomb?
I made the only decision I ever knew how to make. I did what I thought was right.
Throughout the years of negotiations, we have insisted on peace with honor. Let us be proud of the young Americans who served with honor and distinction.
Today.
And the case is built.
See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
George
W. Bush. Repeat over and over that the Nazis killed 6 million Jews in World War II, and the Jews will enjoy endless sympathy, despite Israel continuing to commit many of the same crimes as the Nazis. But if you keep silent about the 26 million Russians killed by the Nazis in World War II, then Russian suffering becomes invisible. Let us see now how this has been applied throughout history. Every year, America celebrates the progress of Western civilization with a propaganda campaign known as Columbus Day.
500년 전
500 years ago, Christopher Columbus set off to claim new riches for the Catholic Church.
1492년
Arriving on a lush Hispaniola in 1492, he spoke of the 3 million Taino Indians who came out to greet them as the friendliest, kindest people in the world.
콜럼버스는 그들이 300만 명이 있었다고
He then
주장했다.
systematically enslaved, raped, and killed them
노예로 만들었고
at such a rate that by 1555, every single one of them was dead.
강간과 살인을 자행하였다. 크리스토퍼 콜럼버스는 신세계로의 문을
Christopher
열어줬을
Columbus
뿐만
not only
아니라
opened the door to a new world, but also set an example for us all by showing what monumental feats can be accomplished through perseverance and faith. George H.W. Bush.
백인 그리스도 교도들의
Such perseverance and faith was the basis of Manifest Destiny, in which the American government decided that God wanted white Christians to take over the continent.
자연과 조화를 이루며 살던 1억 명의
Their God clearly didn't like the 100 million Native Americans who lived in harmony with nature, as 99% of them were systematically murdered. This fact is now celebrated with a propaganda campaign called Thanksgiving Day. Only nobody speaks of land theft, genocide, or destruction of culture.
이야기하지 않고 있을 뿐이다. 그 누구도 신의
Nobody
개화된
questions the propaganda films depicting Native Americans as vile savages trying to stop God's civilized white settlers from making a home.
의문을 제기하지 않고 있을 뿐이다. 사람들은
They're too busy eating and celebrating,
얼마 남지 않은
unaware that the few remaining Native Americans hold a national day of mourning on the same day as a protest against this invasion.
아이러니컬하게도 미국인들은
Ironically, the Americans also have a day for celebrating their victory over invaders.
독립기념일은 모든 사람은 동등한 권리가
Independence Day is a celebration of the Declaration of Independence, which was created by intellectual men
미국 건국의
whose visions were similar to the superior ideals of Juche.
선포를 축하하는 날이다. 종교나 제국의 힘으로부터
Their vision
탄압받지
for a
않는
glorious nation of equal and happy citizens who were not oppressed by the forces of religion and empire
엄청난 인민의
now
고통과
lies in pieces,
환경 파괴를
crushed beneath the uncontrolled drive for profits that have led to enormous human suffering and environmental destruction.
조각이 나 버렸다. 하지만
But America is not the only perpetrator of crimes against humanity and the planet.
인도의 점령과 중국으로부터
Imperialism
아편
is in the
전쟁을
heart of the British, occupying India and running opium wars out of China.
제국주의는 사악한
It switches in the
일본인들의
spine of the
뱃속에서도
wicked
꿈틀거렸다.
Japanese, the
프랑스인들이
French in every
제국
continent,
제2차
and the
세계대전
World Bank and IMF
세계은행과
in
IMF의
every poor
모든
country
기금의
since World War
진출.
II.
이 모든 것들은
All have
정복과
committed grave
노략질을
crimes
위한
against
과정에서
humanity
일어났으며
in
인간성에
their
대한
search to
중대
conquer,
범죄를
steal,
저질렀다.
and erase memories with their
그
lies.
기억들을 지워버렸다. (1788년) 어느 날을 축하하는
Lies like Australia Day,
거짓으로 점철된
a celebration of the day in 1788 when Australians, who were merely geographically displaced European criminals deemed unworthy of being on British soil, were sent off to settle as far away as possible.
자기네 나라에서
These
쫓겨났다.
low-grade humans call Australia the lucky country.
행운의 나라라고 불렀다. 하지만 그들의
But
도착은
their arrival was not so lucky for the Aborigines, who had been there for 40,000 years.
지구상에 출현한 가장 오래된 인류인 그들에게
For them,
이 행운의
the
나라는
oldest human
호주,
presence on Earth,
호주의
the
가장
lucky
오래된
country, is a propaganda phrase used to cover up Australia's most enduring taboo,
인종
genocide.
말이다. 호주 백인들은
White Australians don't like that word. They admit to words like
진압,
pacifying,
살인,
killing,
청소,
cleansing,
추방,
excluding,
멸종,
exterminating,
음독,
poisoning,
사격,
shooting,
기아라는
and
단어는
starving.
인정한다. 인종 말살이란 말은
Anything
빼고 말이다.
but genocide.
진실만은
Anything
제외하고 말이다.
but the truth.
오스트레일리아라고 하는
Look
영화를
at this
한번
film
보도록 하자.
called Australia.
이 영화는
It was made with large tax breaks by the Australian white government to advertise Australia as the lucky country.
이 영화는 이곳에서
It
아직도
used an
인종
Aboriginal
말살이
child
이루어지고 있다는
to
것과
distract people from the ongoing genocide
영국과
there.
미국 주인님들에 의해 핵
And the fact that Australia is now a dumping ground for nuclear waste by its British and American masters.
어린이를 이용하였다. 악랄한 과거를 인정하지 않으려고 하는 또 다른 나라는
Another country that refuses to acknowledge its psychopathic past is Japan.
은폐하려고 하는 실패한 제국 일본이라고 할 수 있다.
A failed empire that tries to cover up all of its vile and putrid atrocities.
그것을 가차없이 도륙을 내버린다. 일본인들은 심지어
While the world cares for threatened species, the Japanese butcher them
돌변하여 죽이는 것을
relentlessly.
즐기기까지 한다.
The Japanese even enjoy luring dolphins into harbors and murdering them in a rage. This barely disguised need to mutilate life is no surprise to us in Korea.
하지만 이 부분에 대해서는 잠시
But we
후
will
다시
come to this
언급하도록
shortly.
하겠다. 우선 프로파간다가
First, let's examine how propaganda was turned into such an effective weapon by the West.
먼저 살펴보기로 하자. 현대 프로파간다는 미국의 대중여론을
It is a remarkable fact that modern propaganda began with the British,
동조를 얻어내기
who
위한
established a secret war propaganda bureau in 1914
선전국을
in order
설치한
to sway American
영국에서
public opinion
시작되었다는
and gain
것은
sympathy for the Allied
놀라운
cause.
사실이 아닐 수 없다. 이 공작은
It was headed by George Creel, who described it as
묘사하였다. 판매
a
기술의
vast
정확한
enterprise in salesmanship,
세계에서
the world's
가장
greatest
위대한
adventure
홍보
in
분야의
advertising.
그의 가장 최우선의 임무는 비록
His
미국
immediate job
본토가
was to convince the pacifist American people
있지만
that a war some 4,000 miles away was worth fighting, even though American soil was not threatened.
반전주의 미국인들에게 설득하는 것이었다. 헐리우드는 8천만 명의
Hollywood held this
시청자가
cause by exploiting a weekly film audience of 80 million with titles such as The Hun Within,
짐승,
The
그리고
Kaiser,
독일놈들의
The Beast of Burden,
등과 같이
and The Claws of the
독일인의
Hun,
위협이
which
바로
all suggested
미국
that the German
영토에
threat
있다라고
was right on
주장하는
American
영화들을
soil.
선전하는 것으로 이 공작에 협조하였다. 이 진행 과정은
The process worked so well that Americans learned to hate German civilians almost as much as the targeted German government.
흠모하게 되었다. 그리고는 전쟁
And just 6 months after his re-election, on a stay out of the war pledge, President Woodrow Wilson declared war on Germany.
And a League of Nations.
일주일 후
1 week
미국은
later, the US set up its own propaganda organization, the Committee on Public Information,
위원회는 굉장한
which
성과를
became so successful
오늘날까지
that it continues to this day as the United States Information Agency.
영국이 평화 상태에서는 프로파간다를 금지하는
While the
동안
British abandoned propaganda in peacetime,
심리학자
the Americans maintained its use under the leadership of Creel Commission psychologist Edward Bernays.
그는 미국의 대중 의견은 반드시 사회 내
who argued that American public opinion must be engineered from above by society's few masters, the 1%, to control the rabble.
So Eddie began to formulate.
그의 첫 번째 실험은
His first experiment was to convince American women that smoking was glamorous and liberating, despite common fears that smoking was associated with prostitution. He did this by hiring models to march in New York's Easter Parade, each holding a lit cigarette and wearing a banner proclaiming it a torch of liberty. The business world then turned to Bernays to indoctrinate citizens with the capitalist story until the masses willingly adopted the idea that America is a country of big business, by big business, and for big business. Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism, because it is a merger of state and corporate power. Benito Mussolini. Meanwhile, Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels was openly thanking the British and Americans for their propaganda model and put it to good use for rallying the German people to war.
Wenn nötig, totaler und radikaler, als wir ihn uns überhaupt erst vorstellen können.
역사적 자료들을 보면
Historical documents prove that Goebbels ordered stormtroopers to burn down the German Reichstag, which he blamed on the communists.
명령하였다는 것을 증명하고 있다. 이 사건들은
This had the desired effect of frightening the population, who surrendered their civil rights and enabled the Nazis to swiftly transform Germany from republic to fascist state and launch World War II.
In 1940, Hitler had conquered France.
3,500만 명이란 목숨.
35 million lives were given up in World War II in patriotic fervor, created by propaganda campaigns.
희생되었다.
Australia marches with Britain, land of plenty, land of untold resources, all placed gladly, willingly at the feet of Mother England.
Look carefully at this man. He's the Emperor of Japan, whose forces have committed the appalling atrocities against British Empire and Chinese troops and civilians, men and women in Hong Kong. These are the swine who bound and bayoneted our helpless soldiers in their hands. If these pictures serve to kindle a flame of vengeance throughout the civilized world, they will have served their purpose. Let the cry be vengeance, bloody vengeance!
미국 대중과 의회는
For the second time, the American public and Congress were overwhelmingly against entering the war in Europe.
Another war, not for me. This time America should keep out, and I know I will.
If war breaks out in Europe, I think that this country should heed the advice of its first president and avoid all foreign entanglements. In the event of war in Europe, I think we should stay out of it entirely.
프랭클린 루즈벨트 대통령은
So, President Franklin Roosevelt needed something that could provoke Hitler into declaring war on the US
위협하여 행동으로
and frighten the public into action.
무엇인가가 필요하였다. 그래서 그는
He did this by deliberately failing to warn his fleet commanders that a surprise Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was imminent.
그에게 경고는
The warnings came to him from the governments of Britain, Australia, and the Soviet Union, and are now a matter of public record.
문건으로 분류되어 있다. 우리 조선은 미국인들에게 위험을 알린
We in Korea were among the first to alert the Americans because we know better than anyone what the vicious Japanese are capable of.
알고 있었기 때문이다.
Slaughtered by Japanese troops.
More power to you, President Roosevelt. The entire country's behind you.
thrilled with hope and patriotism.
프로파간다를 이용하여
As if using
자국내
propaganda to send their pacifist population to war wasn't bad enough.
어떻게 나치를 멸망시킨
Consider how America repaid its people for defeating the Nazis.
주었는지를 보면 그리 나쁘지만도 않은 것이었다. 종이 클립
Operation Paperclip.
종이 클립 작전이란
Operation Paperclip was the safe transfer of Nazi scientists and operatives into the CIA. Nazis like Josef Mengele, the infamous Angel of Death, who carried out live experiments on humans in the death camps. These death industry pros were given new identities as US citizens and employed in US laboratories to develop a dazzling array of mind control programs for the CIA, as well as new products and ideas for US biochemical warfare expansion.
Ultimately, they discovered LSD. All of that drug stuff.
General Electric, DuPont,
Not only did companies like General Electric, DuPont, Ford, and Bell help with Operation Paperclip, but so did Americans like Prescott Bush, the patriarch of the presidents George Bush. Documents in the National Archives and Library of Congress show that he committed treason continuously between 1924 and 1951. First, by using Jewish slave labor in collusion with the Nazis, and then by bringing those Nazis and their assets into America. Despite being a traitor to his country, this Nazi collaborator became a senator, and his family has assumed great power in America. But they are not the only fascist family to thrive from tyranny against humanity. Court records show that the Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company was selling more oil to Hitler's war effort than to the Allies. And for this, a federal judge ruled John D. Rockefeller committed treason against the United States. Treason, the most heinous crime of all. Prior to World War II, this man joined fellow traitor Prescott Bush and the British royal family in sponsoring the eugenics initiatives that gave rise to Hitler's racial hygiene programs. Horrifyingly, today, the Rockefeller family, the UN, and World Health Organization remain at the forefront of administering population programs designed to reduce world populations to more manageable levels. One can only imagine what terrible ideas these monsters have in store for us. To understand how Rockefeller avoided being punished for treason, we need to go back to World War I, when Germany was winning the war without a single shot being fired on German soil. David Ben-Gurion, the head of a powerful group of Zionists, and the American Rothschild family, approached the British with the promise to bring the Americans into the war. In return, they wanted Palestine. The British agreed to this land theft, and at the cost of American lives and money which has never been repaid, they signed the Balfour Declaration, which was addressed to Lord Rothschild from the British government, promising Palestine to the Rothschild Zionists as a national home for Jews. This is both sinister and unnecessary, since Jews lived peacefully for thousands of years amidst the Arab majorities in the Middle East and had no desire to steal their land. The Zionist collaboration with the British worked. Germany went from winning the war to capitulating and signing the Versailles Treaty at, where else, the Rothschilds' palace. Palestine was then declared a British mandate, and the Zionists were able to swiftly colonize Palestine after the Second World War. On May 14, 1948, after Rockefeller leaned on smaller countries in the UN to vote Israel into the United Nations, Israel declared its independence from British mandate.
Today, the British mandate over the land of Israel ends. We declare a Jewish state in the ancient land of Israel. It will be called the State of Israel.
그리고 1년 후
And 1 year later had claimed 78% of Palestine, despite only owning 6% of it. The first Prime Minister of Israel was Zionist David Ben-Gurion, who employed Reuters, which was owned by the Rothschild Zionist organization, to start an enormous propaganda campaign, which continues to this day. Once Israel was established with UN approval, and the world was sold on the fairy tale of Jews finally returning to Israel, David Ben-Gurion started a campaign of ethnic cleansing. We have taken their country. We must do everything to ensure they never return. We must use terror, assassination, intimidation, land confiscation, and the cutting of all social services to rid the Galilee of its Arab population. David Ben-Gurion, 1948. For over 6 decades, Israel has tenaciously pursued this hateful agenda of colonization, ethnic cleansing, murder, terrorism, land theft, and cultural genocide with great success, thanks to American taxpayers who give $3 billion in direct economic and military assistance each year. It is widely understood that this money is currently being used to build this apartheid wall that costs an estimated $1 million per mile. Apartheid is a crime against humanity. Israel has deprived millions of Palestinians of their liberty and property and perpetuated a system of gross discrimination. Nelson Mandela. Israel has become Nazi Germany, destroying their victims' land, confiscating their property, putting them in concentration camps, even stamping numbers on their hands, a practice that led to Yafa Yarkoni, holder of the Israel Prize, to speak out. The occupied territories should be given back, and that's it. We should learn from the Holocaust not to abuse and humiliate other peoples. Yafa Yarkoni is talking about Article 49 of the Geneva Convention, which says that no state may put its own civilians as settlers into occupied territories. Settlers and settlement are, of course, propaganda phrases that evoke legitimate and comforting feelings of finding a home. However, as acclaimed journalist Robert Fisk writes in his novel, The Great War for Civilization, the far more disturbing and far more accurate word for Israel's land grabbing in the West Bank and Gaza since 1967 is colonizing. Settlers are colonists. So why doesn't the world condemn Israel and demand its withdrawal from the occupied territories? Why is America the only country still fervently supporting Israel and its policies? Nobel Peace Prize winner Bishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa observes that the Israeli government is placed on a pedestal in the US, and to criticize it is to be immediately dubbed anti-Semitic.
미국 내에서 잘못된 것을
People are scared in the US to say wrong is wrong
두려워한다. 왜냐하면 유대인들의
because the Jewish lobby is powerful,
너무도
very
강력하기
powerful.
때문이다. 이스라엘의 가장 중요한 프로파간다 승리라고 할 수
The
있는
most
것은
important propaganda victory for Israel has been selling the idea that it is the victim and the Palestinians are the terrorists.
이것을
They do this by controlling the media.
이스라엘 홀로코스트 역사
According to Israeli Holocaust historian Yehuda Bauer, the Holocaust is constantly exploited to deflect criticism of Israel and its own immoral policies.
이용하고 있다. 단 한 달도 새로운
Hardly a month goes by without a new TV production, a new film, a new drama, new books, prose or poetry dealing with the subject. And the flood is increasing rather than abating. Professor Yehuda Bauer.
미국과 이스라엘의 관계는
The reality is that America's relationship with Israel could not withstand public scrutiny,
이것은 곧
which would quickly expose Israel not as a victim, but the most powerful country in the Middle East.
이스라엘은
It is the world's fourth largest nuclear power and the fifth largest arms producer. It possesses nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, but thanks to America, has never signed a non-proliferation treaty or agreed to international inspection. It is also an occupying power in a stolen land that is not held accountable for its actions by anyone.
Watched with his own eyes.
이 지역에서
Anything that's mobile, that moves in the zone, even if it's a 3-year-old, needs to be killed.
지금 이 말은
This was said by an Israeli army officer who was acquitted of any wrongdoing after shooting 13-year-old schoolgirl Iman al-Hams 17 times.
사살한 후 사살한 것을
After confirming the kill to his soldiers, he emptied a full magazine into her head.
세계는 이런 일들에 대해서 알아낼
The world never finds out about these things because Israel doesn't allow it. It calls itself a democracy, but uses a type of propaganda called censorship, where certain phrases and words are not allowed.
Journalists
are not allowed to use the word Palestine. It's the terrorist infrastructure. These territories are not occupied, they are disputed. These are not humans seeking freedom from oppression, they are terrorists. This is not an apartheid wall, it's a security barrier. This is not assassination and murder, it is pacification. This is not state-sanctioned terror, it is self-defense.
Of defense minister of might, power, and beatings, which became
이것은 이스라엘에 의한 피해자들의
This is all part of a carefully orchestrated plan to dehumanize their victims. A tool learned from what the Nazis did to Jews, homosexuals, gypsies, and the mentally diminished.
이 문구는
This propaganda phrase is needed when the imperialist decides to carve up or give away something that doesn't belong to them, like Palestine or Korea.
소국 프로파간다 덕분으로
Thanks to Western propaganda, half the world still believes their invasion of Korea in 1950 was needed to fight communism.
믿고 있다. 하지만
They have no idea that our eternal leader was trying to unify Korea after their leaders tore us apart for war profiteering. They remain ignorant of why we feel harm towards this grave injustice. And what was the result of this manufactured war? A bombing campaign that destroyed 75% of our country and killed 4 million of our citizens. The American bandits also tested biological weapons by dropping infected insects and other agents on us and our Chinese brothers and sisters. Despite these evil and cowardly acts, the West was unable to defeat our glorious nation in the victorious Fatherland Liberation War. Despite a record 7 threats with nuclear weapons by the Americans, with their enormous wealth and military might, we remain undefeated, winning one victory after another, and we are now their longest-running adversary. They are afraid of us, but we are not afraid of them. The Americans label us unpredictable and dangerous, but America is the only nation insane enough to use nuclear weapons on their fellow human beings.
Rivers and streams throughout the city began to boil. People evaporated where they stood, leaving shadows of their bodies scorched onto the streets. In a matter of seconds, 4 square miles of Hiroshima became an atomic wasteland. Several minutes passed. Then a black rain began to fall on the city. Sticky, pebble-sized drops of radioactive ash.
And it is America that has invaded 37 countries in the last 50 years.
I was there as a correspondent. This horrific picture.
We
have invaded none. Even our limp-wristed brothers and sisters in the South feel harm towards the 33,000 imperial occupiers on their land. They also want the Americans to leave, so we can be reunited as one Korea. Don't the consumer slaves of the West want to know why their forces are occupying our country? Do they care? Do they even know? The answer is that most of them don't know and don't care.
왜냐하면 자기들 주인님들이 그들이 무엇을 보고
because their owners have full control over what they see and think.
다 장악하고 있기 때문이다.
텔레비전은 아편보다
far more seductive than opium,
행동 양식이나
infinitely more effective at shaping behavior and expectations than alcohol and religion. Television is the most powerful weapon of psychological warfare in history. Consumer slaves in the West schedule their lives and relationships around watching television. They use it as a babysitter for their youth and wake up to this drug, consume it whenever possible during the day, and go to sleep with it. They even take it with their meals. Television, or TV as they call it in the West, doesn't kill. It pacifies, turning viewers into compliant zombies.
시청자들은
They wear a vacant, glassy-eyed look on their faces
가체면 상태가
because
되기
they are in a trance-like state.
이상적인 상태라 할 수
This is ideal.
소비자는 이제
Now the consumer is sitting still and ready for indoctrination. No force is necessary here. He is a willing participant. It is no mistake that happiness in the West peaked in the 1950s.
Manipulate them in the interest.
Before television was used to enforce capitalism's consumer message. The message that you are not happy. Not unless you buy this product. Look like this person. Or drink this beverage. The West calls these images advertising. Advertising is both propaganda and propaganda distributor. Advertising is about hawking product and creates artificial needs, since most products are completely unnecessary.
Your favorite music?
Advertising unashamedly fosters unhappiness with oneself and with one's possessions. In fact, the very purpose of advertising is to open up emotional vulnerabilities and make people feel that without this product, they are defective.
You need to protect your skin, you need to hydrate your skin, you need to moisturize your skin, and you need to repair your skin.
Corporations employ psychologists, writers, and filmmakers to sell what is essentially the same product. A certain toothpaste, for instance, claims to have a feeling of freshness. This one claims to have dazzling strips of whitening ability, while this one is for people who claim to have teeth so sensitive that it feels like they've been stung by lightning. One of the tricks of effective advertising is to identify the product with a highly desirable quality that has widespread appeal. If you buy this, you will have clear skin and become attractive to others. Use this product and pretend that you too can be a farmer. Drive this car and appear liberated and adventurous, like these actors. Advertisements are nothing but bait, laid out for certain types of consumers.
For up to 14 times more volume.
These same methods are used to glorify the corporations who make these products. This is called corporate propaganda. For example, the General Electric Company likes to boast about its imagination at work, which includes money lending and manufacturing equipment for building missiles and other armaments. The truth is that corporations exist only to make money and are even legally compelled to prioritize making profits over competing interests, such as the well-being of consumers. And there is no such thing as enough profit for the capitalist. This is why they promote globalization, the new slogan for empire. It allows them to promote their symbols, also known as brands, by using slave labor in third world countries. These imperial brands are a symbol of value and meaning, like a flag. But their only allegiance is to profit, not country. Their goal? Maximum profit. Their target? Human beings.
인간들을 자기들 나라나 인민, 환경에는
turn them into mindless consumers who crave their product and keep buying it at any cost to their country, fellow citizens, and the environment. And for what? Look at the background of this commercial. This product is for those with money and high social standing, according to the image. This is how the bizarre need to appear superior to friends, fellow workers, and neighbors is mercilessly enlarged and exploited. But advertising is not just for adults. Propagandists spend $12 billion per year specifically targeting children to form consumer habits early on. They can ingrain their brand by repeating it over and over until the child is indoctrinated and manipulated beyond control.
Dormant feeding. Pepsi drinker for life.
By 18 months, babies in the West can tell the difference between brands. And by 2, they're asking for brand products by name. From the age of 7, the average child has seen 20,000 TV commercials every year. There is only one other group more coveted and groomed by advertisers than any other: preteen and teenage girls. The propagandists call this the tween market. But in fact, it is corporate pedophilia. The aim of corporate pedophilia is to make young people feel inferior and defective by using images that are unattainable. And these images are used against consumers for the rest of their lives to keep them feeling inadequate, unless they buy their products and stick with their brands. The fashion industry is the same. Wear this and you might fit in. Look like this and you will be attractive and popular, like the people in these gossip magazines. These people are called celebrities.
Where do we begin?
While it is natural for a person to become popular for being the best at what they do, today in the West, you are a celebrity if you simply appear on screen. Any screen, even by mistake. You gain credibility and praise for nothing. And the more you appear, the bigger a celebrity you become. If you become a big enough celebrity, then you become a brand to be sold and traded like any other product. Meet Miss Kim Kardashian. She is famous for owning some clothes shops and going shopping. She wears diamonds and fur because they are symbols of wealth in the West. And because she believes she is superior to other humans, she ignores the true cost of these luxuries. This celebrity is called Madonna. She recently started a trend of shopping for children in third world countries, which gained her enormous publicity. She could have adopted one of the millions of poor black children in America who have no home. But that would not have gotten her the attention she so desperately craves. Meet Mr. Tiger Woods, an athlete who has made millions of dollars from his image as an honest, dependable family man, even though the greedy golfer was also having sex with over a dozen waitresses, porn stars, and C-grade models at the same time. This is B-grade actor Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger, seen here with his wife when he was re-elected as governor of California.
캘리포니아의
Unlike the
주지사는
other
여기
B-grade actor who served as governor of California,
이 배우는 대통령까지는
this actor won't be president
왜냐하면
because he fathered a child with the family maid in their marital bed.
이들 두
These two
배우는
actors are very big celebrities.
그들의 이름은 브래드와
Their names are
안젤리나입니다.
Brad and Angelina, and their brand is Brangelina.
그들 또한 제3세계에서
They also shop for children in third world countries.
마찬가지로 이들 또한 미디어의 주목을 받는
Like
것에
other celebrities, they constantly complain about the media attention they get,
어린이를 구매하기
even
위한
though they have entire teams of propagandists who alert the media each time they go shopping for children
전속되어 있는 홍보팀
or
전체가
purchase a coffee wearing the latest designer clothes.
알려주면서도 말이다. 진실은
The truth is that celebrities like these are merely collaborators.
예를 들어 서구 사회에서 담배의
For
사람들을
example, despite the fact that tobacco in the West is laced with more than 2,000 deadly chemicals designed to addict and kill humans,
잡지, 영화,
celebrities frequently appear in magazines,
유명인들이
movies,
자주
and fashion
담배를
shoots
피우는 모습이
smoking
게재된다.
cigarettes.
거대 담배 회사는 청소년들이 이들과
Big
같은
tobacco
유명인이 되고
pays
싶다는
these
것을
trained
알고 있기
monkey
때문에
collaborators of
이들
death
꼭두각시
enormous
협력자들에게
amounts to
먹고
smoke
죽을
and
정도의
glamorize their
어마어마한
product,
돈을 지불하며 담배를
knowing that
피우고
the youth want to be celebrities too.
Nicole, don't do that, you promised.
간혹 유명인은
Sometimes celebrity exacts a terrible toll on the human brain, leading to confusion and misery.
이 가엾은 사람은
This poor man
최근
is Mr.
약물
Michael
과다복용으로
Jackson,
숨진
a very
굉장히
famous
유명한
musician
가수
who recently
미스터
died
마이클
from a
잭슨.
drug overdose.
미국이
Let's
이
look at
사람에게
what
어떤
America
짓을
did to this man.
그의 조상들은
His
아프리카에서
ancestors were raped from Africa and brought to America as slaves, and his childhood was spent working and performing for a violent father who colluded with record companies to profit from his talents.
자본주의
So
소나기에서
much pain at the hand of capitalism leads to an identity crisis.
이 충격적인 영상들
These disturbing images are not film trickery, but the result of a practice known as plastic surgery.
통계 자료에 의하면
In surveys, 9 out of 10 women in the West are unhappy with their appearance,
이런 배경으로
which drives them to spend enormous amounts of money buying cosmetics, clothes, and plastic surgery,
불구하고 여성들은
despite the fact that they will never become celebrities or look like the models in the advertisements.
이것을
This is
소비지상주의라고
consumerism.
대스타죠.
Many of the biggest celebrities have no talent at all.
대단히 유명한
This
여자는
very famous woman is called Miss Katie Price.
그녀의
Her
브랜드
brand
이름은
name is Jordan.
나이 조사에
And despite my
불구하고
research,
그녀가
it
하고
seems
있는
clear
일은
that she doesn't actually do anything.
이 사람은
This is Miss Paris Hilton. This narcissistic parasite comes from a wealthy hotel family. She glorifies her opulent lifestyle without guilt and is said to charge $150,000 to appear at parties.
그녀는 심지어
She
사람들이
even has a TV program called My New Best Friend Forever,
나의
where
새로운
people compete to be her new best friend.
프로그램을 운영하기도 한다. 이것이 서구 사회에서는
Proof that anything in the West can be reproduced and commodified for profit.
될 수 있다는 증거이다. 이것이 서구 사회에서
This is part of a trend in the West for what is called reality television,
하는 것이다. 현실 TV는
a type of freak show programming about talentless narcissists who like to talk about themselves and go shopping.
쇼 프로이다. 미국 현실
In the field of American reality TV, competition is fierce for the most grotesque example of such exploitation. There are shows like The Swan, where women who are deemed ugly enter a plastic surgery competition to see who can be turned into the most beautiful.
She's just very masculine, face, body, basically everywhere. So we really need to change her body with a lot of liposuction, breast augmentation. We really need to feminize her face by doing a brow lift, rhinoplasty, take the fat of her cheeks and her chin. She really deserves to be in this program.
Without a doubt.
이것은 My Super
This one is called My Super Sweet 16, where children have tens of thousands of dollars spent on them simply because they are turning 16.
된다. 이 아이들은 아무것도 이루고
They are treated like celebrities, despite the fact that they have achieved nothing and are out of touch with reality.
거리가 먼 일이다.
And if you're ready,
하지만 이것은
But this is nothing compared to a reality series called The Bachelor, where a handsome, wealthy young man declares his commitment to picking a wife from a bevy of 16 potential brides.
남자가 각각의 여자에게
His sincerity in talking to each woman is chilling, as are their claims to love him.
배우자 후보
After sampling all of the potential brides, he decides who to marry, turning the most personal of decisions into a commodity,
조종되고
an experience to be manipulated, packaged, and sold worldwide.
you guys ready?
텔레비전과 유명인 잡지 같은 방해 기법은
Distraction techniques like television and celebrity magazines are the propagandist's best tools for keeping people from thinking and talking about important issues.
그리고 여기
Now, they have another.
게임 산업은
The games industry now generates more money than the film industry
죽음,
and has cemented the West as a culture of death, violence, and destruction.
이것은
This is Grand Theft Auto 4.
이 게임에서는
Here, you can kill anything that moves and have sex with prostitutes.
가능하다. 이 게임은
This game appeals so much to people, it sold $500 million worth of units in its first week of sale.
게임과 만화 영화는 폭력과 죽음의
Because gaming and animation desensitizes violence and death,
대부분이
much of the billions in military spending goes into recruiting young, poor, and uneducated people to fight their Fortune 500 wars using these same techniques.
싸우도록 한다.
Most serve 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year.
Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18. Come on, fire!
Hey, Roger.
Come on, let us shoot.
1-8, okay, clear.
Come on.
이 게임은 세계
This game is based on something called WWE, which stands for World Wrestling Entertainment.
극도의 폭력은
Extreme violence cheered on by Americans baying for blood.
미국인들은 그들의 절친한
They know
친구와
the names
배우자,
of each one of these actors,
영국의 노력에도 불구하고
and yet they don't know where Britain is on the map, despite the efforts of the British to be their best friends.
알고 있다. 85%의 미국 젊은이들은
85% of American young adults can't find Israel, Iraq, or Afghanistan on a world map. 30% of them can't find the Pacific Ocean on the map.
그리고 75%는
75% of them don't know the population of the US,
얼마인지도 모르고
and 11% of them can't even find it on a map.
어디에 있는지조차도 모른다.
이런 것이 물론
This is ideal, of course. Keep the masses ignorant and pacified on the couch.
폭력, 죽음과
Distract them with violence, death, and the illusions of celebrity. Reduce resistance and thought. Make them choose the bland over the brilliant,
건조한 사람이 되는 것을 사고력이
the
풍부한 사람이
meaningless
되는 것보다는
over the
무의미한
thoughtful,
사람이 되는 것과 쓰레기 같은 것들에 눈이 번쩍
and
뜨이게 하는
dazzle
사람이
them
되게
with
하는
trash.
그런 것 말이다. 이것이 세계
This is now what people around the world accept as normal.
받아들이는 것이다.
This manufactured reality has become more real than this. 38 million homeless Americans. But the media doesn't want people to know about these Americans. Not unless they can be used for entertainment.
You want to be on top?
Meet Miss Tyra Banks, a former clothes model who now has a talk show where she pretends to be concerned about people's problems and society in general, even though she has no qualifications to do this.
And so,
Here, she dresses up and pretends to be homeless in order to experience life on the streets, which is impossible because she owns numerous homes and great wealth. The audience doesn't question this charade, but instead it willingly feeds into her need to talk about herself. Here we see America's Next Top Model, where everything is covered in her Tyra brand. Everyone has to shout and scream and appear delighted at the mere mention of her name. In this episode, she has the contestants made up to pose as blood-spattered and mangled corpses, while across the other side of the world, her fellow Americans were shooting, stabbing, and blowing up an estimated 1.8 million Iraqi civilians. Like most Americans, she doesn't know or care about these numbers. She is concerned only about a life of style over substance. There are now more propaganda-filled screens and magazines than at any other time in history. And these are controlled by just 5 giant media companies. This creates more opportunities to distract people from what really matters. More opportunities to brainwash them. More opportunities to sell them poisoned food and drugs they don't need. More opportunities to drip-feed them a meaningless, distorted reality. No, this is not a Hollywood blockbuster. The planes crashing into these towers are real, and these buildings crashed to the ground, including one that wasn't hit by anything at all. The American population was terrorized, hypnotized, and traumatized by repetitive showings of the devastation, with the media repeating over and over that it was a terrorist attack. However, 11 years after that day, it seems certain that everything was staged like a Hollywood blockbuster. Logic, physics, and history point to this incident being another false flag operation, like the bombing of the German Reichstag, Pearl Harbor, and the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And polls in the US confirm this. 87% of Americans now believe that 9/11 was a contrived pretext for an endless war on terror and the opportunity to remove their democratic rights and liberties.
One by one, the terrorists are learning the meaning of American justice.
But the real threat to Americans is not terrorism.
2001부터 2009년 사이
Between 2001 and 2009, the number of deaths from terrorism in America stood at 3,000. In the same period, there were 192,000 deaths by homicide, 204,000 drunk driving, 360,000 suicide, 456,000 secondhand smoke,
당뇨병으로 인해
873,780 diabetes,
780명, 암으로 인해
4,622,268 cancer,
2,268명, 흡연으로 인해
5,304,000 smoking related,
심장 질환으로 인해
6,238,284 heart disease.
684명이 사망하였다.
Today our nation saw evil.
We will not rest until this evil is driven from our world.
그렇지만 그들의
But their
지도자들은
leaders
제약회사와
focus only on the
식품회사들이
phantom dangers of
해외에서
terrorism,
신무의 인종 말살과
while allowing
같이
food and drug
자국민들을
companies
죽이는
to make more and more
고도
poisonous
많은
food
위독성
that is
음식을
killing
만드는
its
것은
people like an
허용하는
internal,
반면
unspoken
단지
genocide.
테러리즘이란 무형의 위험에 초점을 맞추고 있다. 이들은 심지어
They even protect these killer companies.
보호까지 한다. 담배를 예를
Cigarettes, for example, are the only consumer product that doesn't have to list its ingredients on the packet.
소비 제품이다.
공평하게 말하자면
To be fair,
2,000개의 독극물 이름들을
it would be difficult to fit the names of 2,000 poisons on such a small box.
어려운 일일 수도 있겠다.
우리가 여기서 다시
Here
한번
we are
생각해야 될
reminded
점은
that wars are
전쟁이란
not fought for
국가와
flags and
국민을
citizens,
위하여 싸우는 것이 아니라 기업을
but
위해서
for
하는 것이라는
corporations.
것이다. 미국의 프로파간디스트들에 의해서
The war on
자국민을
terror,
위협하고
engineered by American
조종하기
propagandists to
위해
frighten and
가동된
control their people,
테러와의 전쟁, 이기는 것이
is impossible to win,
그렇지만
but
영원히
endlessly
이익을
profitable.
창출하는 어떤 똑똑한
I'll
사람이
be
이
long gone
주무실에서
before some
무슨
smart
일이
person
일어났는지
ever figures out what
밝혀내기 전
happened inside this
나는
Oval
이미
Office.
잊혀져 버릴 것이다. 조지
George
부시.
W. Bush.
우리 조국은 제국주의적
We are the only
프로파간다에
country left on the
침범되지 않은
planet
지구상에
that has not been
남은 유일한
invaded
국가이다.
by imperial
우리는
propaganda.
아직까지 그들이 포갑 앞에 무릎을
We
꿇지
have not
않았고
succumbed to their tyranny,
앞으로도 그러지
and we
않을
never
것이다.
will,
왜냐하면 우리는 1%의
because we know
지배계급이
what the ruling
두려워하는 것이
1% is afraid
무엇인지
of.
알고 있기 때문이다. 그들이 두려워하는
They are
것은
afraid
진정한
of real
민주주의.
democracy.
그들은 인민들이
They are afraid that people will begin to
프로파간다를
recognize their
인식하기
propaganda
시작하고 그것을
and start
대처하기
rejecting it.
시작하는 것을 두려워한다. 사람들이
They are
선거라는
afraid
행태로
people will
행해지는
demand more power
사기성
than the
경매보다
fraudulent
더
auctions
많은
passed off
돈을
as
요구하게 되는 것을
elections.
두려워한다. 그들은 인민들이
They are
조직적
afraid
저항운동을
people will
시작하여
begin organized
인민으로부터
resistance
자율권을
and stop
빼앗도록
obeying
보완된
laws designed to
법률에
disempower
복종하지
them.
않게 되는 것을 두려워한다. 그들은 또한 인민들이
They are
대표적
afraid
대기업들을
people will
위한
start asking
전쟁을
why they have to
왜
fight
해야 하는
wars for the
것인지에 대한
Fortune 500
의문을 갖기
companies.
시작하는 것을 염려하고 있다. 그들은
They are
인민들이
afraid that people will start to realize that those who commit atrocities against humanity have names and can't hide behind flags and corporations forever.
그들은 또한
They are afraid that people will gather in mass crowds and make citizen arrests,
더한 것을 발동하게 되는 것을
or worse.
다른 어떤
More
것보다
than anything, they are afraid that the world will decide it wants a new beginning,
원하게 되는 것이다. 약탈자,
a revolution that has no place for the pillagers and plunderers and exploiters.
혁명 말이다. 우리는 이
We are
세계의
the
혁명의
headquarters
사령탑이다.
of this world revolution.
우리는 우리의 평화로운 조국과
We will fight to the death to defend our peaceful nation and beloved leader
노예와로부터 지키는 것,
from the cruelty,
그리고
exploitation,
저항할 수 없는 모든 곳의
greed,
사람들을 향한
enslavement, and
폭력으로부터
violence
지켜내기
against
위하여
helpless peoples
죽는
everywhere.
순간까지 싸울 것이다. 우리는 500년
We will defend ourselves as we defend the rights of billions of humans who do not benefit from 500 years of Western civilization
인민들의 권리를 보호하듯이
and the cancerous empire of corporate collusion.
낼 것이다. 우리는 우리 마음에 파고드는
We must remain vigilant at all times
항상 경계의 고삐를
And be alert to their insidious attack on the mind,
이전에도 그러했듯이
for they have come before,
이러한 공격은 또
and they will come again.